Well, it's true. He is being almost vilified now for having sort of spawned this chaos. I want to go back a little bit to some of what I'm reading in the obituaries with regard to how he's being credited, for example, with ending the Cold War. And certainly there's discussions of President Ronald Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, but really not much of a discussion of the role that the U.S. had in that end. It takes two, and of course that end of tensions required us to be cooperative. Give us some sense as to what you think, he actually deserves credit for, and what the role of Reagan was in all this as well.
Well, you have to remember, it's hard to believe today, but back in the 1970s, when the U.S. was going through what was called the Great Inflation, and we looked like we were a declining power, that the economy was never going to be robust again, people thought the Soviet Union was going to be triumphant. And one of the things that happened in the 70s that with the inflation, and we're seeing it happen today with the high oil prices, is that the Soviet Union got a massive windfall of hundreds of billions of dollars from commodities like oil that were artificially made higher in price by inflation. And so in the 1980s, what Reagan did by reviving the U.S. economy, going on a major military buildup, and conquering inflation meant that the Soviet Union was no longer getting these windfalls. Oil went from almost $40 a barrel down to $10 a barrel before stabilizing at around 20. So the massive infusion of this windfall money from artificially high commodity prices was at an end. Gorbachev realized that industry was sclerotic, stagnant, uncreative. Agriculture was a disaster, and high tech, it didn't exist. An embarrassing contrast to the vigor we saw in Silicon Valley, which was coming to the attention of the world in the 1980s. So Reagan set the conditions where an intelligent person like Gorbachev could realize the Soviet Union could not continue on its present course. So in that sense, what Reagan did forced Gorbachev to make some hard choices, hard choice for a communist leader, but he made those choices. And what is amazing between these two men is that they're able to end the Cold War without violence. Everyone thought first the Cold War was going to go on forever, be a permanent fixture of humanity, and that if it would end, it would only end in a cataclysm of nuclear war. Instead, it ended with a whimper. Gorbachev refused to use force to crush rising people rising up in Hungary and East Germany and elsewhere. In times past, the Soviet regime would have just mowed them down by the thousands. Gorbachev wouldn't do that. So he made a way in which Eastern and Central Europe could achieve real independence. Germany could be peacefully reunited. And inside of Russia, you could have constituent nations break off and pursue their own destiny. Remember, even after the breakup of the Soviet Union, what they call the Russian Federation was still huge in a landmass, had about 170 million people. And if the proper things had been done, there was no reason why Russia couldn't become a major economic power instead of a poor power today that is relying on military might and guile to exercise power around the world. So again, I think Gorbachev had the vision of having Russia go back to where it was in 1914 on a peaceful path to becoming a peaceful, prosperous, and more open society.